G'day guys, I'm the Ugg Boot Investor. Yep, that's right. I like Ugg boots, which I'm wearing right now, and I like investing. But more importantly, I am passionate about personal finance and control of money to ensure that you create freedom. My mission is to help people set up the foundations of good money management techniques so that they can overcome existing financial issues that they have and hopefully avoid any future potential financial issues or money traps. Today I want to talk to you about the money-making formula. Probably the single most important formula to determine long-term financial success. And it's really simple, right? So we're going to break it down from the start through to the end, and we're going to use some worked examples to show you how you can portion your money correctly no matter where you are on your financial journey. So let's jump in. Quite simply, the money-making formula is yes. Y minus E equals S. What is Y? Y is the universal economist symbol for income. So you have income minus E expenses equals S savings. Why is this important? Well, if you spend less than you earn and invest the difference, this is the greatest determining factor for wealth creation over the long term. So you want to ensure that S is always in surplus. So let's break this down into its more detailed components. So how do you get to this situation? Well, you start with your gross income, you subtract your donations, you subtract your deductions, and then that leaves you with your annual net income. Now, this is really, 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 really important, and I can't stress that enough, because most people, they go to work, they earn a salary, let's say they earn $80,000 a year, and they go, well, I get to spend $80,000 a year, and that's just not correct. All right, you have to subtract any donations to charity that you get, you subtract any deductions that you have, retirement, tax, etc. And then after all of that, that is the money that you get to spend throughout the year. So how do you proportion this money? Well, the simplest way to proportion it is 20% for savings and investing, 10% for debt reduction, and 70% the remainder for your living expenses. And to create a little simple thing, we've said, well, let's just call this GIDANI. GI, gross income, D, donations, minus D, deductions, equals ANI, annual net income. And then you proportion that in 20, 10, 70. The reason that we do 20 first is 20% you always must pay yourself first, right? So you make your savings, and then 10% you must proportion that towards debt reduction, and the remaining 70% is for your living expenses. So let's have a look at what gross income actually is, right? So gross income is any form of money that comes to you as an individual. That can be salary or wage, which is very typical. It could be business-orientated income. It could be interest, say from shares or personal loans that you've given out to other people. You could have rental income from real estate. You might be on welfare. That's a form of income. And then there could be other forms of income that you're receiving, capital income, for example. If you were to sell an asset, that comes in as your gross income. From here, you then subtract your donations. So, from a donation perspective, that could be any form of monetary handout that you have to a charitable cause, right? And then, quite simply, you then subtract your deductions. Now, there's really two forms of major deductions. Your first one is retirement deductions, and since I live in Australia, our government takes 10% of our gross income and puts that towards retirement fund because they believe that you can't control your money over the long term, and so they're going to do it for you. So we're here to prove them wrong. And the next form of deduction is tax, income tax. Now, tax is really, really, really important. It helps the government control the economy, it helps set up infrastructure, it helps create jobs. There are a numerous amount of reasons that the government uses tax to help better society, hopefully. So I'm not against tax, it's just something that has to happen in the deduction stage. Once those deductions are made from your gross income, you're left with your annual net income. Yay, right? So this is where we're at right now. The wealthy people, they understand this, and the people who don't understand this get themselves into trouble. Because what they'll do is they'll start off with their gross income and they'll go, hey, I earn $80,000 a year. Great. And so then they'll spend $80,000 a year. The reality is that they then have 10% of their income go towards super or retirement fund. They have a portion of their income go towards tax purposes, and for the purposes of the example, we're just going to use 30%. And then that leaves them with $56,000, $57,000 at the end of the year. And so because they've spent 80, but they only actually can spend 57, they're left with a shortfall. And so they have to use debt in order to create or rectify that shortfall. And we're trying to avoid that. So what we're going to do here is go with our remaining annual net income, we're going to proportion that 20% towards savings and investing, 10% towards debt allocation or debt reduction, and 70% towards living expenses. You know, once we understand this on a fundamental level, you end up in a situation where you can use your 20% saving for investing to create your emergency fund, to create, a 6 months living expenses. So you don't have the worry that other people have. If you lose your job, you've got 6 months worth of expenses to be able to help sort yourself out in the future. Once you've put the oxygen mask on yourself, you can then start to look at things like, share or real estate investing or any other form of investing that is to your liking or suitability. At all times, you need to be reducing the debt. If you have personal debt such as credit cards or buy now, pay later or car loans or whatever it is, you need to make sure that you pay this off. You do not want to have personal debt in your name. And always 70% for living expenses. Now, what is living expenses? It's rent, it's food, it's fuel, it's entertainment that you want to have with your friends out, any clothing, education, insurance, electricity, water, gas, etc. Make sure that your spendings sit within the 70% of your annual net income. Once we know this, right, and this is fundamental, once we know this, we then come to what I've created as the financial freedom quadrant. And what it really says here is, how do you proportion this 20, 10, 70, depending on where you are in life? Now, if you have no savings and no personal debt, then you want to be saving as much as you possibly can. You need to put your oxygen mask on first before you can help other people. But you always want to be reducing debt. So you want to be saving 20% and you want to reduce your debt continually at 10%, and you always maintain that living expenses at around 70%. Now, if you had savings now and personal debt, it's not as important to start saving as it is to start debt reduction. So you shuffle the numbers a little bit, you continue to save and invest at 10%, and you start really hammering down on that debt reduction. And once you have some savings and now you have some investment debt, you want to continue to pay that investment debt off. You don't want to have, in the long run, investment debt to your name. So you start saving, investing at 20%, and you continue to repay at 10%. And the ultimate goal is to get to that state where really you have no debt, and you have savings, and you have investments to your name. And so what happens here is that you have 70% of your income goes towards your living expenses, and 30% of it now goes towards saving and investing, because there's no longer any debt in your name that you need to service. And that's a really, really, really powerful position to be in. So let's do some worked examples, because I think it's really important to see this firsthand. Here is our example one, and Patrick's going to be our test dummy for this video. He has currently no savings and a bunch of personal debt. So Patrick earns $80,000 per annum, and he makes voluntary donations to charity of $2,000 a year. He finds himself living paycheck to paycheck and has a personal credit card debt which is overbearing. It's just swamping him. He's never budgeted before and he has no money in his account. What should he do? Well, let's break these numbers down so you can see firsthand how it actually works. Patrick starts with his $80,000 gross income. He then takes his donations and his 10% mandatory retirement, and that gives him his taxable amount. So 80,000 minus 2 minus 8,000 equals 70,000. At this point, the government steps in with a handout and says, hey, we want our tax or our money. And so this is what you get income taxed on. Now I'm just going to quickly link how you get there. If you've never understood how the income tax works, for Australia, you go to the Australian Tax Office and look up your tax tables. You can see here in this particular example, and you end up with $13,217 for Patrick's $70,000 taxable income. That leaves Patrick with a net income of $56,783. So he starts off with his $80,000 gross income job and he ends up with a net income of $56,783. Now, a lot of people don't understand this, and this is critically important because the $56,783 is what Patrick can use to live off. So now let's portion this out. He has no savings. He needs to put his oxygen mask on. He needs to build up a 6-month savings, living expenses. And so we're saying that Patrick should put 20% of his net income towards a savings account. And at the same time, he needs to reduce his debt by 10%. He needs to keep chugging away at these personal credit cards and keep paying them off. The remaining amount, 70%, is his living expenses. Okay, so Patrick's being diligent now in the second example. He's now built up 6 months worth of expenses through his savings account that we've just talked about, and he's gotten used to putting the money aside, which is great. That's a habit thing that comes into play, and he still finds himself with his credit card debt. So what does he do now? So none of the gross income, donations, retirements, none of that changes here. So we're still working off the same net income. We're now reproportioning the monies. And I've broken down saving and investing as 2 separate categories here because Patrick's done enough savings. He's built himself up his 6 months living expenses. He doesn't need to build that up anymore if he's comfortable with that amount. But he should put a portion of his money, say 10%, towards investing. And he now needs to focus quite heavily on reducing his debt to 0. And so your debt reduction goes up from 10 to 20%. And an alternative here is that instead of creating 10% investing, it's 30% debt reduction, 0% investing, 0% savings. However, for the principles of the example, I think it's quite important to understand really that debt reduction now needs to happen in force at this particular stage. Now, Patrick has done this. It's taken him a couple of months. He's been working at it, and he's really reduced a lot of his expenses down to 0. So he's got his 6 months worth of living expenses saved. He's paid his last credit card off. He doesn't have any more credit cards. So where does he go from here? Now, he's in a great position because Patrick has no requirement at this stage to continue saving for living expenses purposes. He has no requirement to put money aside for debt reduction. And so he's built this habit up of putting aside 30% of his income towards debt reduction or saving or investing. And really, where's it going to go from here? He's taking that money and he's going to put it towards investing. Now, what Patrick decides to invest in is really up to Patrick. He could take that money and, at worst case, put that into a high interest savings account. He could put it into the stock market, put it in for real estate as a deposit, or whatever it is that Patrick wants to do. But the point is that Patrick takes 30% of his net income and then puts it towards investing purposes so that money can grow. Now, Patrick's been doing this for a little while, and he's actually managed to build up, in the fourth example, a deposit for a family home. And he doesn't know now that he's done this and he's buying his family home, he doesn't know how he proportions his money. Well, once Patrick has bought a family home, he now has debt again in his name. So the numbers need to shift. He needs to continue to invest so that he can grow his portfolio and grow his wealth and grow his income. But at the same time, he needs to focus on reducing the existing debt he has in his name. Patrick is now going to shift so that 20% of his net income goes towards investing and 10% goes to paying off now what is investment debt for Patrick. Where does that leave us? That leaves us here back at the financial freedom quadrant. The ultimate position that you want to be in is right up here, where you have the maximum amount of savings and the maximum amount of wealth creation potential. If you have no debts, you can save more, you can invest more. And that's really, really critically important. Thanks for sticking around to the end of the video. Don't forget to hit that like and subscribe button. It makes a big difference to me, and I really appreciate that. I hope this video has helped some people. You will fall into one of these 4 categories. It should help you to start to portion your money out correctly. And if you have any questions, I'm going to be available for an hour after upload to answer any comments or questions in the video links below. So thanks guys, we'll see you next time.